Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, entitled The Status Quo, Chapter 4, Vidura approaches Maitreya, and today's text is 31. Please repeat, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Text 31, please repeat. Nodhavon Vapimanyuno.
It's just coming.
Nodhavon Vapimanyuno. Yadunar Nardita Prabhu. Yadunar Nardita Prabhu. Yadunar Nardita Prabhu. Yadunar Nardita Prabhu. Attamavayunam lokam.
Attamavayunam lokam.
Attamavayunam lokam.
Attamavayunam lokam.
Rahaya ihatishtatu.
Grahayam tishtatu.
Rahayan ihatishtatu.
Grahayam tishtatu.
Nodavon Vapimanyuno.
Nodavonam vipimanu.
Yadunar Nardita Prabhu.
Yadunar Nardita Prabhu.
Attamavayunam lokam.
Attamavayunam lokam.
Rahayan ihatishtatu.
Grahayam tishtatu.
Please chant.
Nodavonu apimannunyo.
Nodavo Anmapimanyuno.
Yatgunanadita Prabhu.
Yadgunayarnardita Prabhu.
Ato mam vayunam lokam.
Ato matvayunam lokam.
Rahayan ihatishtatu.
Rahayan nihatishtatu. Nodavo Anmapimanyunam. Yadgunayarnardita Prabhu.
Yadunar Nardita Prabhu.
Ato matvayunam lokam.
Ato mam vayunam lokam.
Grahayan ihatishtatu.
Rahayan ihatishtatu.
Nodavo Napimanyuno.
Nodavonam vipimanyuno.
Yadunar Nardita Prabhu.
Yadunar Nardita Prabhu.
Attamavayunam lokam.
Attamavayunam lokam.
Rahaya ihatistatu.
Grahayam ihatishtatu.
Nodavon Vapimanyuno.
Nodavonam vipimanyuno.
Yadunar Nardita Prabhu.
Yadunar Nardita Prabhu.
Ato Madvayunam lokam.
Ato mam vayunam lokam.
Rahayan iha tishtatu.
Rahayan iha tishtatu.
Modoram vatimanyyo.
Modoramati manyo.
Atmanita prabhu.
Yadunai Nandita Prabhu.
Tamavayanam lokam.
Atmavayunam lokam.
Rahayan iha tishtatu.
Rahayan iha tishtatu.
Anybody else? Word for word synonyms, please repeat. Na,
Na,
not.
not.
Udava,
Udava,
udava.
Udava,
Anu,
Anu,
slightly.
slightly.
Api,
Api,
also.
also.
Mat,
mat,
to myself.
to myself.
Yuna,
Yuna,
inferior.
inferior.
Yat,
Yat,
because.
because.
Nai,
Nai,
by the modes of material nature.
By the modes of material nature.
Na,
na,
nor.
nor.
Ardita,
Ardita,
affected.
affected.
Prabhu,
Prabhu,
master.
master.
Ata,
Ata,
therefore.
therefore.
Matmayunam,
Mat,
Vayunam,
knowledge of me, the personality of Godhead.
knowledge of me, the personality of God.
Lokam,
Lokam,
the world.
the world.
Rahayan,
Rahayan,
just to disseminate.
just to disseminate.
Eha,
Iha,
in this world.
this world.
Tishtatu,
tishtatu,
may remain.
may remain.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So this is Krishna thinking to himself. He's not speaking out loud. He's thinking to himself as he is getting ready to wind up his Leela here in the material world. He's getting ready to leave the vision of the material world. So Krishna thinks to himself, Uddhava is not inferior to me in any way, because he is never affected by the modes of material nature. Therefore, he may remain in this world in order to disseminate specific knowledge of the personality of Godhead. Purport. The specific qualification for becoming the representative of the Lord is to be unaffected by the material modes of nature. So, that one sentence there is pretty strong. That unless and until one is actually unaffected by the three modes of material nature. Abhimanyu, what are the three modes of material nature?
mode of ignorance, fasting, and goodness.
Okay, good. Do you know the Sanskrit words for those?
I don't.
Okay, mode of ignorance is tamagun, and mode of passion is rajagun, and mode of goodness is sattvagun. So, unless and until one is completely free from the influence of the three modes of material nature, one can't represent Krishna. That means one can't be a guru. So unless one's actually liberated, one should be very careful about taking the position of guru. The highest qualification of a person in the material world is to be a brahmana. But since a brahmana is in the mode of goodness, to be a brahmana is not sufficient for becoming a representative of the Lord. In other words, good is good, but it's not good enough. So that's the highest qualification in the material world, to be, Mr. Mode of Goodness. Just to be totally in the mode of goodness, but it's not good enough for knowing Krishna or representing Krishna. One has to transcend the mode of goodness also, and be situated in unalloyed goodness, unaffected by any of the qualities of material nature. Now, usually when we hear unalloyed, it means it's not mixed with anything. So when we say unalloyed gold, that means it's not mixed with anything else. It's 100% gold. So here Prabhupada says one has to be situated in unalloyed goodness, unaffected by any of the qualities of material nature. So how are we to understand this? It seems like the first phrase, Prabhupada is saying one has to be totally in the mode of goodness, unalloyed goodness. But in the second phrase he says we have to transcend all of qualities of material nature, including goodness. So this unalloyed goodness that Prabhupada speaks of is not the material sattva guna. He's not saying one must be completely in the mode of goodness. He's talking about a different goodness, which is not material but is spiritual. And that's called Shuddha Sattva. So one has to transcend the mode of goodness also and be situated in unalloyed goodness, unaffected by any of the qualities of material nature. This stage of transcendental qualification is called Shuddha Sattva, or Vasudeva. And in this stage, the science of God can be realized. So if we want to understand why we're not fully understanding the science of God and why other people are having great difficulty in receiving the message of the science of God, it's this simple point that we haven't transcended the influence of the modes of material nature. As the Lord is not affected by the modes of material nature, so a pure devotee of the Lord is also not affected by the modes of nature. That is the primary qualification for being one with the Lord. So, the Mayavad school, the monistic school, and the New Age school, they like to talk about being one with God, becoming one with God. So Prabhupada always stresses that becoming one with God means being one in quality with God. And what is that quality of God? That the devotees are to become one with Him? How do devotees become one with God? What is the quality that we have to develop for us to be able to say, yes, we are one with God? Meaning we're one with Him qualitatively, not I become God. What did Prabhupada say that quality is?
Cooperation?
Humility?
No, he just said it in the purport.
Oh,
Shuddha Sattva. That one has to be like the Lord, completely unaffected by the modes of material nature. Now, good luck. That's a really high order to try to, fulfill. So, Prabhupada said, as the Lord is not affected by the modes of material nature, so a pure devotee of the Lord is also not affected by the modes of nature. That is the primary qualification for being one with the Lord. A person who is able to attain this transcendental qualification is called Jivan Mukta, or liberated, even though he is apparently in material conditions. So in other words, one may have a material body, but be Jivan Mukta, liberated even while in the material body. A material body which seemingly undergoes, influence of material nature. Because, like one time, somebody challenged Prabhupada that, well, if you guys are liberated, why do devotees experience disease and old age and death? And Prabhupada said, yes, the body will undergo these transformations of disease, old age, and death, but the devotee, their consciousness is not affected by those changes. They're not affected by the modes of material nature, although the body seemingly undergoes, transformation. This liberation is achieved by one who constantly engages in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. In other words, you're not going to attain liberation from the modes of material nature by doing part-time devotional service, by doing part-time Krishna consciousness, by doing half-baked Krishna consciousness. It has to be full-time, full effort, no cutting corners, no watering it down with something else, unalloyed devotional service. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.187, it is stated, Iha yasya harer dasye karmana manasa gira nikila swapyavastasu jivan mukta sa uchyate. Anyone who, by his actions, mind, and words, Those are the three things we have to dedicate to Krishna. Our actions, our mind, and our words. Anyone who, by his actions, mind, and words, lives only for the transcendental loving service of the Lord is certainly a liberated soul, even though he may appear to be in a condition of material existence. So, some devotee claims to be liberated. What's the litmus test? What's the barometer or whatever for, seeing whether they're liberated or not? Anybody can say, "Hi, I'm liberated. You should accept me as guru because I'm liberated." Well, how are you going to test whether that person is liberated or not?
By his actions, mind, and words.
Yes, you have to see that all of his actions, all of their words, all of their mental activity is only dedicated for the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Uddhava was in such a transcendental position, and thus he was selected to be the factual representative of the Lord in the Lord's bodily absence from the vision of the world. Such a devotee of the Lord is never affected by material strength, intelligence, or even renunciation. What does that mean? A devotee of the Lord is never affected by strength, intelligence, or renunciation.
Doesn't become proud.
Yeah. Doesn't identify with it, doesn't claim it as their opulence and become proud. Such a devotee of the Lord can withstand all onslaughts of material nature. And if the material nature is in a war, have you noticed? We think we live in a peaceful country, we haven't had war on our domestic soil in countless decades and century or whatever. It's been a long time since the Civil War. We haven't had a war on domestic soil. But actually, each and every one of us is constantly engaged in a war. But we're kind of sleeping through it, and therefore we're losing. And what is that war? It's the war with Maya. So Prabhupada says that there's an onslaught of material nature. Not just an occasional, throw a snowball at you or something. This is all out vicious war. Such a devotee of the Lord can withstand all onslaughts of material nature, and therefore he's known as Goswami. Only such Goswamis can penetrate the mysteries of the Lord's transcendental loving relationships. End of Srila Prabhupada's purport. So unless and until one is completely free from the three modes of material nature and can completely withstand the onslaughts of material nature without, falling, only such a person can actually enter into the mystery of the Lord's transcendental loving relationships. Until then, even we read Krishna book, read 10th canto, etc., we won't properly understand. We may even become envious of Krishna when we read his pastimes, because after all, that's why we're envious of Krishna, that he gets to be the enjoyer and we don't get to be the central enjoyer. He's the proprietor and controller of everything, but we don't get to be that proprietor, Even in our devotional service, I don't want to do that service, because when I do that service, I have to work under certain other people, right? I'm not like the head of the department or whatever, so I have to work under people, and I don't like to work under people, so I don't want to do that service. I want a service where I can be the controller, I'm in charge of this little teeny tiny corner of the world. Let me do that. We don't like to admit that we're not God. We're not the enjoyer, we're not the controller, we're not the proprietor, and we're not the benefactor of others. We think, the poor animals out there, they're going to starve.
Yeah.
I have to feed them. I even have to go to the store and buy special food for them. No, you don't. God's constantly making this point, that from the amoeba to the big elephant in the jungle, God is supplying food for everyone. And now you think you have to be the benefactor and provide food and shelter? You know? So anyway, this freedom from the propensity to think oneself God, to think oneself free of material onslaught, one has to actually become free from the material nature. Actually, not just in name. Actually has to become free from the modes of material nature. So how to do that? Wouldn't that be nice to know? We know that's the goal, become free from the modes of material nature. Okay, well, gosh, tell us the secret how to do that, and everything will be okay. So we have a couple of interesting verses in Bhagavad Gita that we want to look at and understand what's being said here, because it almost seems like there's a contradiction here in Krishna's words. So if we go to the end of the 14th chapter, text 26, Krishna speaks this commonly quoted verse. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature, and thus comes to the level of Brahman, or spiritual realization. So that's the formula. You want to be free of the modes of material nature? Just engage in full devotional service. And there you go. Because while you're engaged in devotional service, you can't be touched by the material modes. So that's the answer. Become fully engaged in devotional service. Okay, well, that seems straightforward. I can accept that. But now we come to chapter 18 at the end of the book here, and Krishna speaks another verse. 54. Brahmabhuta prasanatmana shochatina kamshati samasarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktir labhate param. One who is transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He's equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Do you see the difference? In text 14:26, Krishna said, just engage in full devotional service, and then you will at once transcend the modes of material nature and come to the level of Brahman. But in this text, 1854, he says, when one is situated in Brahman realization, spiritual realization, that means freedom from the modes of material nature, then that person can engage. He attains pure devotional service unto me. So which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Which comes first? You come to the level of totally free from the modes of material nature, and then you can engage in devotional service, or you engage in devotional service and then you become totally free of the three modes of material nature. Well, we can't vote for one or the second because Krishna says both of them. So if you vote for one and disagree with the other, then you're agreeing with half of Krishna's statements and disagreeing with half of Krishna's statements. So how do we solve this?
Depends on where you're at?
Hmm?
Does it depend on where the person's at?
Well, but Krishna's saying, it's like I'm giving you instructions on how to eat pizza. And I say, first you go to the kitchen and cook pizza, and then you eat it. And the second instruction I say, first you eat pizza, then you can go to the kitchen and cook it. It's like, excuse me, you can't have both instructions. So Krishna's saying, engage in devotional service, then you'll be free of the modes of material nature. And then the second one, become free from the material modes of nature, then you can engage in devotional service.
Is that because there's different stages of devotional service?
Yes, there's different stages of devotional service. Yes, so in 1426, Krishna is saying, one who engages in full devotional service. That means you take the discipline. It's called sadhana bhakti. Bhakti in the apprentice stage. We're like apprentices, learning the art. One who takes the discipline of following the spiritual master's instructions, to attend arti and kirtan and classes and guru puja, what have you, to chant 16 rounds a day, etc., 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 engage in practical devotional service. One who strictly follows the spiritual master's instructions to use their body, mind, and words in service to Guru and Krishna. If they just take the discipline to do that, it's hard work. It might seem distasteful sometimes, or even painful sometimes, but if we just take that discipline and do it, then Krishna says, you at once will transcend the modes of material nature and come to the level of Brahman, liberation. Then in 1854, after he has spoken to Arjuna the entire Bhagavad Gita and has glorified the process of pure bhakti, he says, when one comes to the level of Brahman, or liberation, then one can engage in my pure devotional service. That means that devotional service which is not done out of discipline, that devotional service which is not controlled by rules, regulations, discipline, driven by the intelligence, I have to do this, therefore I should do it, But that devotional service which is actually driven by spontaneous, pure love. That level of real devotional service. Prabhupada in other places says, when one comes to the level of liberation, then real devotional service begins. Now, we shouldn't be discouraged and think, oh, well, what have I been doing all these decades? It's not real devotional service. Well, it's devotional service in training. The med student first practices doing surgery on a cadaver. Then they go to the operation room and do a real surgery, right? The military folks, they train with their guns and everything, shooting at targets. Then they go to war and shoot at real people. So like that, our devotional service is real and it actually counts, but it's devotional service in practice. So when one comes to the stage of real devotional service, completely free from the modes of nature, then one can take the position of Acharya. As Uddhava, Krishna glorifies Uddhava for being that kind of a devotee, completely free from the modes of material nature, completely dedicated to me, and therefore is my worthy representative. Therefore, I can leave. I can depart from the planet because I fully trust that Uddhava can bring my message to the sages in Badarik Ashram and enlighten them with my, message. I'm free to go now. So such a devotee as Uddhava, the Acharya, like in ISKCON we have our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada. Such a devotee is to be worshipped as good as God. And Krishna himself says this in Canto 11. And interestingly, he speaks this verse to Uddhava. This is a proclamation that Krishna says to Uddhava, which we don't hear about until the 11th canto. We hear here in the 3rd canto that, Krishna was giving Uddhava so many nice instructions, but we don't hear about those instructions until we go to the 11th canto. So in 11, 17, 27, this very, very important verse is spoken by Krishna to Uddhava. Acharya mam vijaniyan navamanyeta karchit namarcha buddhya suyeta sarvadeva mayo guru. One should know the Acharya as myself and never disrespect him in any way. How do we disrespect the Acharya?
Feel envious?
We're envious of him. Therefore it says he continues, one should not envy him, thinking him an ordinary man. That's the third offense to the holy name. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master, making him an ordinary person, right? Like you give me an instruction, I don't have to follow it, because my intelligence might say that, well, that instruction was all well and good, but I have an even better understanding of what to do. You know, I can one-up you on that one. So I don't have to follow your instruction or advice. But not with the spiritual master. So Krishna says, one should accept the Acharya as myself and never disrespect him in any way, and one should not envy him or consider him an ordinary person. So does that mean that the Guru is God, Abhimanyu?
No.
Krishna says, but Krishna says, one should accept the Acharya as myself. Doesn't that mean that the Guru is God?
You give him all respect.
You
God,
gave the great answer.
except
And
that
oh.
that he wasn't God, but
Mhm.
he is the representative of God.
Mhm.
So you treat him like you would treat this God
Exactly.
himself, but you understand that he's also not
Exactly.
God.
And this seems to be like an elementary point, but it's extremely difficult for people to understand. Because there's a very subtle but extremely significant difference between worshiping the Guru as good as God and worshiping the Guru as God. And this is where the Christian tradition has failed. Their Guru, Lord Jesus Christ, who Prabhupada very much respects, he's the representative of God the Father. But the Christians have, in a very little time, morphed that understanding improperly into Jesus is God. And that's when the whole thing falls apart. As soon as one accepts the Guru as God, the whole thing falls apart. Rather, the Guru is as good as God, although different. So this is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy, achintya beda abeda tattva. That simultaneously, the Guru is different from God, yet the same as God. So how is that? As Krishna pointed out nicely, that the Guru is the pure representative of God. Just like these windows, when they're really, really clean, I don't see a window. I see the trees on the other side, as though I'm outside directly looking at the tree. That window's so clean, I don't even notice the window. It's a perfect via medium. So like that, the Guru has to be a squeaky clean pane of glass. But the disciple is foolish if they say that my Guru is God. Now when we're neophyte, we're often told, it's often stressed, the sameness of the Guru with God is often stressed more than the difference of the Guru with God, because we have such a proclivity to see the Guru as an ordinary person. It's so easy. You know, because guess what? He passes stool and urine. He gets sick. He has to take a shower. You know, so it's so easy to see them as good as an ordinary person. So the Guru will often, and Prabhupada kind of did this in many cases, the Guru would often almost stress the oneness of Guru with God than the difference. One time, disciples of Bhakti Siddhanta, Prabhupada's Guru, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, wrote many, many, many books, both in Bengali and English. So in one of his English writings, one of his disciples noticed a spelling error. Bhakti Siddhanta spelled an English word improperly. And the disciple brought it to the other disciples' attention. Oh my God, Guru Maharaj spelled a word wrong. I thought he was like perfect. You know, he doesn't make mistakes. The Guru doesn't make mistakes. He spelled the word wrong. And the comment was, the dictionary should be changed to fit the spelling of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. One time Srila Prabhupada was giving his disciples some mail to take to the post office. And he had one letter that he was sending to India. So he had it in an envelope. But he had a couple of the corners of the envelope ripped off. You know, just a little piece of the corner was ripped off. And the disciples wanted to correct Prabhupada. Oh no, we can't send international mail in an envelope that's ripped. We got to get a fresh envelope to put it in. And Prabhupada said, no, you mail it in that envelope. But Prabhupada, it might get further ripped open and then the contents will fall out and we can't mail international mail with rips in the envelope. You know, like you made a mistake, we got to get a better envelope. And Prabhupada said, no, this mail is going to India and they will think that there's money inside. So I have purposely left the corners ripped so that anyone who wants to steal the mail, steal the money, will look inside and see there's nothing but a letter in there and let it go.
Oh, I do that. It's a,
So he had a
there's story
purpose.
called the Purloined Letter. I learned that.
Uh-huh.
Just make something look, it's just so obvious that
Right.
people think, oh, it's just nothing.
Right. Another time, Rameshwar Prabhu and others were on a walk with Prabhupada, or in a room conversation maybe, but in any case, talking to Prabhupada, and Rameshwar said, Prabhupada, what should we think? Oh no, it wasn't Rameshwar. Take another different, I got the card. This is Jayadvaita Swami, Jayadvaita Brahmachari at the time. He was with other devotees walking with Prabhupada, and he asked Prabhupada, you can hear it on a tape, on an audio, he asked Prabhupada, Prabhupada, what should the disciple think when we see the Guru make mistakes? And Prabhupada was like, the Guru doesn't make mistakes. No, Prabhupada, I'm talking about like, maybe they misspell a word, or like a grammar mistake, or a math mistake, right? What should we think when we see the Guru make a mistake? And Prabhupada would not let go. He said, no, you are the one that's made a mistake. Your vision is the mistake. That you see mistakes in your spiritual master means your vision is mistaken. So these are examples of the Guru maybe taking it to an extreme to teach the devotees, the disciples, to never see the Guru as an ordinary person. And such mistakes, like they make a math mistake or a spelling mistake, the disciple cannot use that to say, just see, my Guru makes mistakes. When one's more advanced and mature, they can understand these things. But as a neophyte, we become offensive. We start to envy the spiritual master and think him an ordinary person. So the remedy for that is to worship the spiritual master as good as God. Therefore, the Guru Puja is there. Okay, we'll stop there, see if there's any discussion. No, Priya.
So is the unalloyed goodness the same as liberating?
I'm sorry?
Someone in unalloyed goodness, is that like,
Unalloyed goodness means Shuddha Sattva. It's a spiritual goodness, not the material mode of Sattva.
right?
A lot of times when we're reading Prabhupada's books, he talks about Sattva Guna, and then he talks about Shuddha Sattva, unalloyed, pure goodness. It doesn't mean the material mode of goodness, which is unalloyed by the other modes. It actually refers to Shuddha Sattva, or the Vasudeva state, which is a transcendental
Same as
mode.
liberated?
That's liberation.
Okay. So because I wanted to know if there was examples of how, someone who's regular mode of goodness and one unalloyed. But like what really puzzles me is when you see a devotee like take Bhima in the Mahabharata, it looks like he's really acting in the mode of passion sometimes. But then we're told he's a pure devotee.
Well, you, in one sense, gave a bad example because he's part of the Lord's Leela. So externally, it'll look like he's in the modes of nature.
Okay, you know,
Um,
good.
You know, I don't mean it's a bad example,